Shkayach. Okay. So today, welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. We're learning about life hacks from Elijah the Prophet. Imagine if you could get wisdom from Elijah the Prophet, if he could tell you about how you could live a better life, a more meaningful life. I mean, this guy was one of the rare individuals who went from being a human being to becoming an angel. That's pretty cool. I mean, think about that. You know how he became an angel? It's a pretty awesome story. If you haven't read the story, you should. You should read the Navi, the prophets. If you haven't, you know, when we read the 5 books of Moses, it's great. But after the 5 books of Moses, you read the books of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings. Read the stories. It's great stuff. I highly recommend you buy the Torah Anthology. Torah Anthology is a set of many books, which you can find on the internet. And it just goes through verse by verse of the entire Torah and prophets and writings. You've seen it? And it's beautiful. And it gives it expanded commentary. It's just fantastic. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. It fills you in with just magnificent information. And it's just a lot of fun. It's beautiful. So I highly recommend you do that. And Elijah the Prophet, basically, what happens to him? He gets an Uber. He gets an Uber to heaven, but in a chariot of fire. And actually, his student Elisha the Prophet is standing with him, and he asks his teacher for a blessing before he dies. So he says, "What's the blessing that you want?" He says, "I want to be a prophet, doubly as great as you are."
Doubly.
You know, that's like my kid who says, if I had wishes, I would ask for 1,000 wishes, you know? So that's what he did. He says, I want to be doubly as great as you are. So Elijah says to him, it's a tall order, but I'll make you this deal. If you see how I leave this world, then you'll know that your wish will be granted. And he notices then how he goes up in a chariot of fire. True story. I actually took an Uber a few weeks ago. I was in New York. I was getting ready to leave from the Rabbinical convention. I was with 2 of my boys. I get into an Uber, you know, it's late, New York traffic, only 6 miles to the airport, but that's like 60 minutes. In Florida, 6 miles is 6 minutes, right? So I'm getting into the Uber, and suddenly the Uber's on fire. The back of the Uber is on fire. And the guy takes out like this hairspray thing, and he starts spraying out the
hairspray. That helps.
My bag was like all melted. But clearly, this is not the first time it happened. I don't know what was going on in that Uber, but I was so late. I was like, I'm going to take this Uber and then just be ready to evacuate at a moment's notice. But it was a chariot of fire, so we kind of made it. Thank God we didn't arrive in heaven. We arrived at the airport, thank God. But let's see. Elijah the prophet now, he becomes an angel. And what he does is that he descends into our homes on special occasions. Does anybody know when Elijah the prophet shows up in our homes? Havdalah too. Havdalah. He comes Pesach. Pesach and Bris. Yeah, we got a chair for Elijah at every Bris, and he comes for every Pesach. Oh, we sing about him in Havdalah. Is that because he comes? I don't know if he comes Havdalah. Yeah.
I know, but that's because we're looking for Mashiach to come.
Oh, exactly. It's not because he's coming, Toby. It's because we're just like praying for him to come because he's the harbinger of redemption. By the way, quick welcome to all of our friends, Tzipi and Stacy and Jack and Leah from New York. We met you in New York and Hot Cake. Oh, okay. And fine, very good. Nice to see everybody. So let's get into this, guys. So we're in the Talmud, bottom of page 309. This is it in the Yamaka, volume 1. Elijah the prophet, we're on page 309 in case you have the book. Elijah the prophet said to Rav Yehuda, the brother of Rav Salah the pious, do not become angry and you will not sin. Now, we learned this last week, so we're going to move on from that one, the previous class in the series. Do not become angry and you will not sin. Do not become drunk and you will not sin. So don't get inebriated.
Except on Purim.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Well, he doesn't say that it's a sin. He says it leads to sin. Why would it lead to sin? Why would it lead to sin? Because you obviously don't have your faculties.
You're not in control.
You know, it's really interesting. When the Rebbe had his heart attack in 1978, the Rebbe refused to go to the hospital. And if you read the biographies on the Rebbe, it's amazing. The Rebbe refused to go to the hospital, and they actually turned his room, his office, into a hospital room, into an ICU. And when they wanted to put him on the general, the Rebbe said, never in my life have I ever, or no, I think the Rebbe's wife said, the Rebbe said, never since I've ever known him has my husband not been in full control of all of his faculties. I mean, think about that for a moment. So he refused to take the general anesthetic, I believe, if I remember correctly. But what an amazing thing to be able to say. Like, never in his life, as long as I've known him, has he ever not being in full control of his faculties. Now, what happens when you're drunk, when you're inebriated?
You don't have control.
Yeah, exactly.
Inhibitions are removed.
Yeah. So as Hasidim, what we do is we drink l'chaim. We drink l'chaim in order to calm down our to lower our inhibitions and to lower our guard, so we can, out of our bringing, we can have more closeness with each other. But you should not reach a state of inebriation, because that's going to lead you to sin. And when you set out on a journey, first seek permission from your creator and then set out. What does that mean, seek permission from your creator? I think it might mean that you're supposed to make a prayer for travelers, right? That's what the Gemara says on the next page. What is meant by seek permission from your creator and then set out? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yaakov said in the name of Rav Chisda, this is referring to the traveler's prayer. Tefillah Saderech, a prayer recited when traveling. Everybody know where the traveler's prayer is? You'll find it in the Chayinu, in the table of contents. It says there's always a traveler's prayer.
It's at the very back, right after Shacharis.
Oh, it's printed in the Siddur right after the morning service, right after Shacharis, okay? Very interesting. You're supposed to make this traveler's prayer. Just a few things I want to share with you is that there's a directive, a Kabbalistic directive from Rabbi Yehuda the Chassid. Rabbi Yehuda the Pious says that if you leave on a journey, you're not supposed to go back home.
Not supposed to.
If you leave on a journey, you're not supposed to go back home to pick something up.
Oh, you can't forget them. You come back.
You're not supposed to go back. You're not supposed to turn back.
Unless it's your passport.
Well, yeah, unless it's your... So listen to the story. Unless it's your passport, says Harvey, right? So the thing is like this. Why are you not supposed to do this? Because the reason you're not supposed to do it is because the angels that accompany you on the journey, remember like Jacob's ladder? So the angels that accompany you, they go once. But if you go back, then you leave the angels, they think the journey's over, and now you're on your own. So you shouldn't do that. That's what he writes. It's a bit of a mystical work. He talks about you shouldn't polish your shoes on the day of a journey. It's very mystical stuff. So we should learn that book one day. It might be interesting to learn the directives of Rabbi Yehuda the Pious. But why am I sharing this with you? Because one time there was a guy in Crown Heights in New York who had to go on a journey, go to the airport, and then halfway he remembered they left his passport at home.
This is a problem.
So this is a problem. What's he going to do? So they called the Rebbe's office. And the Rebbe's office gave him a directive like this. When you go home, when you go into the house, make sure to sit down and study a chapter of Tanya. And when you study a chapter of Tanya, you'll become a new person. Because every time you learn a chapter of Tanya, you reinvent yourself. And once you reinvent yourself, it will be like a new person. So therefore you can go back on a new journey, it's like a new day, a new person, a new journey. Isn't that an interesting perspective on how we study Torah, on the impact that Torah has on us, and how we're supposed to view Torah? I mean, think about that. When you study Tanya, do you let the Tanya take over you, or you just sort of racing through it at 100 words a minute? Do you allow it to reinvent you? It's a beautiful thing. Okay, let's go further down. I'm glad you like the book. So yeah, we should definitely look into that. I wonder if it's in English. Anybody, if you could let me know if if the writings of Rabbi Yehuda the Pious are in English, it'd be great to find out. Okay, so the Gemara continues. And how does the person pray the traveler's prayer? Rav Chisda said, while standing in one place. Rav Sheshes said it may be recited even while traveling. So it's a very interesting question today. When you recite the traveler's prayer, it seems like the consensus is that you're supposed to say it when your plane is taxiing. While the plane is taxiing, in other words, while it's moving on the ground, you're on the journey, but before wheels up. Right? That's when you're supposed to say the traveler's prayer, because there's a bit of a debate here, right? Is it supposed to be while you're sitting in one place or while you're traveling? So we do it kind of like taxiing in the middle, right? The Gemara continues a related incident. Rav Chisda and Rav Sheshes were traveling along the road. Rav Chisda stood up, that is, he stopped and he prayed the traveler's prayer. Rav Sheshes, who was blind, said to his attendant, "What is Rav Chisda doing?" He replied, "He's standing and praying." Rav Sheshes, the blind, said to his attendant, "Stand me up also and I will pray, even though I hold that it is not necessary to stop in order to say this prayer. Nevertheless, if you can be good, do not be called bad." If you can be good, do not be called bad. What does that mean? Since the people with whom I'm traveling have stopped in any case, let me not be called bad by praying while traveling, even though I hold that this is permitted. So in other words, he decided that he's not going to change from the status quo. If that guy already established the status quo by stopping in order to pray the traveler's prayer, therefore he's going to do the same thing. He's not going to be deliberately overruling his friend, right? Sometimes you have these contrarians that if somebody does one thing, they dafka do the other way. Based on the story in the footnote, the code of Jewish law rules that it's best to stop traveling to recite this prayer. However, if interrupting the journey will cause the person to worry, and this will disturb its concentration, and may be recited while traveling. So, for example, if you're in a caravan, you know what a caravan is? You're traveling through the desert with a caravan of camels, and if you're going to stop and pray the traveler's prayer, you're going to be left in the dark, right? It's not going to be pretty, and you might be killed by a bandit, by a highwayman. So then, obviously, it's going to be very distracting to you to stop. Then you should not stop.
How about when you're driving a car?
Exactly. You should pull over probably, right? You probably should pull over because you shouldn't pray and drive at the same time. Which reminds me of a good story. Reminds me of a good story of the rabbi gets into a taxi in Tel Aviv International Airport, and it's Israel, and the taxi drivers, they when they see a red light, they go. When they see green, they stop, right? Because when there's a red light, it means the other guys are no. When there's a green light, it means the other guys have a red light,
Right.
which means they're racing forward. So at a green light, you got to slow down. At a red light, you got to go forward. So they get into a taxi, and they get into a crash, God forbid, and both of them die. They both go to heaven. There's a backlog in the waiting room in heaven. So the concierge angel over there at the concierge desk, he sees the taxi driver and the rabbi. He says, "Taxi driver, you come with me. Rabbi, you take a seat. You can wait over here." Where are you taking the taxi driver? Oh, he's getting a fast pass to heaven. Why is he getting a fast pass to heaven? I'm the rabbi. He's just a taxi driver. So the concierge angel says like this: When you gave a sermon, the congregation fell asleep. When he drove, the people prayed. Okay, so let's see. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the directives of Elijah here, bottom of page 310. Let's go a little bit deeper to get a bit of an understanding on the three teachings of Elijah the prophet. What are these random life hacks that he's teaching us? He says, don't lose your temper, don't become inebriated, and make sure to pray the prayer for travelers. I mean, like, are these such vital life hacks? Are they so important?
What angry you'll sin.
What specifically is a prayer for the traveler?
Oh, what is it? Oh, so you can find it in the prayer book.
Oh,
It's like page 88
okay.
in the prayer book, approximately page 88. In fact, I think Rob just ripped it out of his book over there.
Yeah.
Out of his chaynu. You can give him a copy.
Sure, Harvey, you can read it.
Harvey, yeah, he's giving you a takeaway copy, a traveling copy.
Rabbi used to put it
Yeah,
in.
they make them on these little business card things.
Yeah.
It's actually not a bad idea. I should make my business card with a prayer for travelers.
You
Maybe people might save it. What?
can clip it on your visor.
It's a good idea, actually.
That's good too. And so you can read it while you're driving.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So let's see, guys. Let's see a little bit deeper. Let's dive a little deeper into what Elijah had to say. All right. You should take this with you when you travel. It's very good, very, very good thing to take with you. Bottom of page 310. Elijah's directives. The connection between the first two teachings of Elijah is self-evident, right? If you're angry or drunk, you're liable to sin. Okay, that makes sense. In other words, you'll lose your bearings. You'll lose you'll lose control of your priorities if you are, if you are either drunk or angry. It's interesting, by the way. The Talmud says something very, very interesting, folks. That if you want to get to know a person, how do you get to know a person? Do you remember the three ways? In Hebrew, it rhymes. It sounds very good. In Hebrew, in English, it doesn't rhyme. B'koisoi, b'kisoi, uveka'asoi. Koisoi, kisoi, v'ka'asoi. Koisoi means his cup. Kisoi is his pocket. And ka'asoi is his anger. You want to get to know someone. You get to know them through their cup, their drink, how they react when they drink, through their pocket when they have to deal with money, right? Oh, I left my wallet at home. You know people like that? They always left their wallet at home. What does that tell you about someone, right? And then I forgot my wallet. And then the reach. When you do the reach in the you do the reach.
I left my wallet.
And then there's the third one is their anger. So how a person reacts in their anger, how they react when they drink, and how they react when it comes to money is going to teach you volumes about the person. So, for example, you guys are executives and CEOs of companies. I'm curious to know if you would hire a person only after you take them for a round on the golf course. Is there such a thing?
I don't golf, so I never did that. So.
Seriously, is there such a thing? You know how you get to know a person when you see them on the golf course?
Some people, yeah, but
Right. How they react.
But I
Is
was
that
never
a thing to take someone to a golf course before you hire them?
I never.
I heard that. I heard that. I'm not the golf.
I've heard.
Chuck will tell you.
Chuck, yeah, what do you say,
1,000
Chuck?
people.
You've hired 1,000 people? 1,000 people you've hired.
More in my company.
So what do you do before you hire a person? How do you characterize a person? CP says, "Nichnas yain yatzasod." Wine comes in, secrets emerge. What do you do before you hire someone?
Well,
Just a boring
speak to
interview,
other
that's it?
people, Speak to other people about.
That's
them.
old-fashioned. Just interview and just ask
But
questions.
we're old-fashioned people.
Take them out to dinner.
Oh, take them out for dinner. Now that's interesting. When you see their relationship with food,
Yeah.
right? You see, are they gluttonous? Are they courteous? Are they sensitive? Are they nice to the waiters? Right? Interesting question, right? So I got to tell you, whenever I'm at the golf course, I get to meet people. I don't spend that much time at the golf course, but I see people and I watch their reactions when they hit the ball. What happens right after they hit the ball? Some people are just even keel. Doesn't matter where the ball went. They just cool. Other people, they're just making, what do they call those things? Turret? No, those things, divots. They're just making divots.
They slam
the stick into the floor. The stick, the club. The shtick, yeah. So okay. Anyways, so that's how you get to know a person. So it makes sense. The first two directives, when he says about anger and he says about drunkenness, right? Those actually make sense. What were you saying?
Okay, if he says don't get drunk for whatever reason, why do we leave a big glass of wine at 8 billion seders for him on Pesach? Did say he can't.
That's a good question, Toby. Toby's saying, I like that. If he says don't get drunk, then why do we give him such a big giant glass of wine? Well, the good thing is, Toby, is that he definitely doesn't drink it.
He doesn't drink it, I know.
But I'm thinking,
He's drinking wine.
why do we give him a glass of wine? I'll tell you why. It's not for him to drink, Toby. You know who's supposed to drink that glass? We are. But we don't drink it yet. You know why? Because the 4 expressions of redemption. Today we're starting Parshas Shmos. We're beginning the exile today. The 4 expressions in today's Torah portion of redemption are, and I will take you out, I will save you, and I will redeem you, and I will take you. These 4 expressions of redemption, right? In today's Torah portion, they are corresponding to the 4 cups of wine that we drink at the Seder, but there's a fifth expression of redemption during the Passover story, and that's Vehevesi, and I will bring you. And I'll bring you where? I'll bring you into the promised land, all of it, including Gaza, including Syria, including the so-called incorrectly named West Bank, Judea and Samaria, including the 3 lands going all the way from the Nile to the Euphrates.
Right.
That's the 5th expression of redemption, and we can't drink that glass yet until Elijah shows up and announces the redemption. I hope and pray that Elijah will show up before the hostage deal is announced, so that we can have a true end to this war instead of a cessation of hostilities.
And releasing all those.
That's right, releasing all of those Sinwars. Releasing those Sinwars, God forbid, to plan the next one. Anyways, that's good. Great question, Toby. Let's keep it going, guys. So we understand the first 2. But so therefore instruct, do not become angry and you not sin, and do not become drunk and you not sin. But what is the connection between reciting Tfilas HaDerech, the traveler's prayer, to the first 2 points about intoxication and anger? Let us first examine more closely the connection between anger and intoxication. The Gemara in Eruvin tells us that if a person's character becomes apparent, that a person's character becomes apparent when he becomes drunk or angry, as I just explained. Man is endowed with an intellect and a physical body. He was created to achieve perfection through physical actions that are guided by his intellect, right? As human beings, we have mind over matter. This is one of the foundational principles of Tanya, of Chabad philosophy, that Mayach Shalit Al Alev, the mind dominates over the heart. And a person is always responsible. There is no such thing in Torah as a person claiming, there's a word for this in law today in America, claiming insanity or something, claiming that I didn't know what I was doing. There's a word for this in legal terms, right? Any guy.
Insanity.
Yeah, no.
Is it insanity plea?
It's called non-compos mentis.
No corpus mentis.
Non-compos mentis.
But in Torah, a person is always responsible for his actions.
Accountable.
Oh, exactly. Always accountable. You can't say I didn't realize, I wasn't aware, right? You can't say that. A person is always, Adam muad la'ilam, the Gemara says, a person is always held accountable. Why? Because your mind dominates over your heart. You're not an animal that is instinctive. You are a human being that is cerebral. This is foundational Tanya chapter 9, right? So he was created to achieve perfection through physical actions that are guided by his intellect. The person's intellect refines his animal nature and elevates him to a spiritual plane. Physical desires and feelings are part and parcel of our physical makeup, but these can be held in check by one's intellect. When the intellect is rendered useless, like through intoxication or anger, one becomes vulnerable to his basest desires and feelings. Those desires and feelings are innate and not caused by wine or anger. Rather, the wine or anger just suspend the intellect, leaving one vulnerable and unprotected against the base elements of his character. There's a beautiful story about this, just to illustrate. You know where the Yamaka comes from? The Yamaka. Where does it say in the Torah that you should wear a Yamaka? Nowhere. Doesn't say it anywhere. Doesn't say anywhere. The Gemara says that there was a sage, I believe his name was Rabbi Yeshua. I can't remember right now. Might have been Rabbi Yeshua. That his mother was told when he was a little boy, an infant, that he was going to grow up to become a wild man, like a bandit or something. So what she did was she figured she had to mitigate his animalistic desires, passions, and she needed to increase his awareness of God. So she gave him a constant awareness of God, a Yirei Malka, an awe of God, awe of the king, which was a covering of his head. That's just the earliest documented covering of the head. She gave him a covering of his head to always remind him that there's something higher than him, that he's accountable. I think his name is Rabbi Yeshua. Forgive me, I might be wrong. Anyways, so the story goes that one day he grew up to be a sage because he was always accountable and aware of God. One day he was sitting under a palm tree, and somehow somebody knocked off his Yamaka, and as his Yamaka fell off, he turned into a wilde chaya, like into a wild beast, and he climbed the palm tree with his bare hands, and he started chewing the dates off with his teeth. This is what the Gemara says. It's an interesting story, right? Because his passions, his desires were mitigated by his awareness. The moment his awareness was taken away, his passions were let loose, right? So that's what's happening over here, where a person, you've got an animal inside of you. You got a wilde chaya. There's an epic battle of titans within you. Your animal soul is waging battle against your godly soul at all times. The question is, are you able to keep it in check? The answer is yes, because mind rules over heart, unless you are able to suspend your mind through anger or through inebriation. Right. Traveling can also compromise one's intellect, because traveling makes you wary at home. In his familiar setting, a person feels at peace, and his intellect can reign supreme. The rigors of travel, however, diminish one's peace of mind. King David says in Psalms, I'm trying to remember the exact words of King David when he says, I forget the exact words, but he says, my travels have exhausted me. My travels have absolutely exhausted me. And one's preoccupation with the dangers he may encounter on the road render him anxious and less attuned to his intellect. Though not drunk or angry, he is in danger of losing his spiritual way, allowing his physicality to come to the forefront. It is this subject that Elijah addressed. Elijah was trying to tell you how to stay in control at all times. Don't drink to the point of intoxication. Don't lose your temper, right? And he says, and when you travel, make sure to pray. He told Rabbi to always make sure that your intellect is intact, for it is what connects you to Hashem and allows you to remain in control of your beast inside of you. Render your intellect useless, and you give your body free rein, and you will surely sin. To this end, he advised, do not get angry or drunk, and you will not sin. You have it within your power to avoid anger and wine. Travel also presents similar dangers, but travel is often necessary, so you couldn't say don't travel. He just said, when you travel, make sure to pray this prayer. Elijah could not simply tell a potential traveler to remain at home. Instead, he instructed the traveler to seek permission from Hashem before traveling, which gives us a new profound insight into the travels. Harvey noticed the prayer of travelers a moment ago, and he was like, oh, wild beasts. Which wild beasts do you think you're talking about?
Ox could be your own wilde chaya.
Exactly. It's your own wilde chaya. You're on a plane. What wild beasts do you worry about now? Yes, hijackers is a concern, of course, right? But then, of course, there's the inner wild beast, which is what we're learning about in the Talmud today. What a beautiful piece of Talmud, which reminds us that human beings are not impervious to sin. And, you think about it, you got all these politicians that really rose to the tops of their professions. And then somehow they fell.
They go to Washington and drink the water.
They go to Washington and drink the water. There's something in the water. I'm not sure what it is, right? Is it the power corrupts?
Everybody.
And absolute, what does it go? Absolute power corrupts. Power corrupts, absolutely. Right. So maybe the power gets to their head or something, and they lose their sense. They lose their bearings. They feel that they're animal form, right? They feel that they're more equal than the other animals, right? So what we're doing in our prayer for travelers, it's such a humble prayer to be able to say to God, God, I'm not, it's like ethics of the Father says, don't believe in yourself until the day you die. Don't believe in yourself until the day you die. There was a great sage, a high priest. His name was Rabbi Ishmael, the high priest, who was a holy, righteous high priest. I think 60 years he was the high priest. And to be a high priest means that you have to be authentic. Because the high priest goes through the test of authenticity more than anybody else. How does he do that? He goes into the Holy of Holies once a year on Yom Kippur. And inside of the Holy of Holies, you cannot be thinking an ulterior thought. The Holy of Holies is a reader of thoughts. And if you have an improper thought inside of the Holy of Holies, you die. They would tie a string around his leg in case they needed to retrieve his lifeless corpse, because nobody else was allowed to go in there to retrieve his corpse in case he fell. So this guy made it successfully in and out of the Holy of Holies for about 60 years. At the end of his life, when he was 80, he became a heretic. He became a heretic. I mean, think about that. So if that could happen to him, and he was not the only one, there were others in Jewish history that such things happened to. You've got to realize that you have to be mindful of your human weakness and your vulnerability, right? We talk about the mechitza, for example. We talk about there's a law established by King Solomon. It's called yichud. You know what the law of yichud is? King Solomon established this law that you're not allowed to be alone with a woman that you're not married to in a room. You're not allowed to be alone in a room with a woman that you're not married to, even if she's single. There's a lot of laws associated with this. Now, this might sound so archaic, so old-fashioned, so primitive, right? But if you're honest with yourself, you realize that even the highest and most pious people of the highest ideals, they cannot succumb. They cannot. They can't succumb to temptation, right? Think of Joseph and by the way, you know why Joseph is called a tzaddik? Who else is called a tzaddik in Torah? You don't say Moshe had tzaddik, Moshe the righteous. You don't say Abraham the righteous. You don't say anybody else. Does anybody else say about him that he's a tzaddik? I don't think so.
Because he escapes Pharaoh's wife.
No Pharaoh, Potiphar's. Only one person is called the tzaddik of Torah, and that's Joseph, because Joseph was the one who prevailed over temptation, and he got real close to sinning. And that's why he's called a tzaddik. Think about that, right?
So why do you get a pass on porn?
We get that in a moment. Let me just finish this paragraph. So indeed, instead he instructed the travelers, Elijah instructed the travelers to seek permission from God before traveling. Though reciting prayer for travelers and placing one trust in God to protect him on his journey, it is as if the traveler is asking God to accompany him on his travels. With God in his mind and together with him on his journey, he can hope to remain safe both physically and intellectually, and thus spiritually as well. It's interesting, by the way, that Rabbi Dovid Groner, who was the rabbi in Australia, like he was sent by the previous rabbi, I believe, in the 40s to Australia to be the rabbi there. He was a great man. I actually spent some time in his house when I got my rabbinical degree in Melbourne, Australia. His grandson was my study partner. So Rabbi Dovid Groner was a giant, big, physical man. Very large man. When he would travel to New York from Australia, I mean, in the 50s, that was like a week-long trip, you know? So the Rebbe would encourage him, and the Rebbe would say to him, I'm going with you. And I believe he would buy an extra seat next to him. There are those who say that he bought the extra seat next to him for other reasons. Girth, he needed an extra seat. But he would have an extra seat for the Rebbe. And the Rebbe actually said to him, he struggled with anxieties. And the Rebbe said to him that he should dump his anxieties over the Pacific Ocean. Can you imagine, right? Interesting. So back to Rob's question. Rob, what is your question again? So why do we get a pass on Purim?
Yeah, why do you get a pass on porn? And doesn't that?
I would think, why do we get a pass on Purim?
Each of us, they have one pass a year.
It's like one mulligan, right?
Yeah,
So
mulligan, yeah.
I'm thinking like this, that perhaps the reason we do it on Purim, we become inebriated, is because we're doing it within the context of a mitzvah. In other words, if you're drinking alone, and by the way, the Rebbe said that the Rebbe banned anyone under the age of 40 who's a chassid to drink more than 4 shots. Under the age of 40, the Rebbe said, if you drink more than 4 shots, I don't want you to be my emissary. If you drink more than 4 shots. But after the age of 40, I'm good. You're on your own, right? So there's obviously a state of maturity there. Point being that it's not just a pass on Purim, but it's actually a pass that Farbrengens too. And I believe that the answer to that the answer is that if you're in a holy context, if you're drinking inside of a shul, surrounded by your rabbi and your fellow millionaires, and you're doing so in the look, if you're doing it at the bar, or if you're doing it because you had a fight with your wife to drown your sorrows, now or because business ain't that great, that's bad news. But if you're doing it within the context of a mitzvah, then there's the benefit of the drinking, which is like this. What happens with the benefit of the drinking, as I mentioned earlier, is that you lower your inhibitions and you open your heart to be more receptive to your fellow Jews, to be receptive to constructive criticism and to inspirational messaging. And when you sing a nigga, normally when you sing a nigga, you sing a nigga, okay. When you sing a nigga, when your heart is vulnerable, it's a whole different experience. So that would be my answer to your question.
So, God forbid, I should never cheat on my wife. I should do it in a show.
I did not say that, sir. I did not say that. Okay.
It says, he says you only have to avoid wine. I guess scotch and vodka weren't invented yet.
Right.
All right, guys, I'm going to end it over here. Wish everybody a lovely day. Let's try to apply these amazing directives from Elijah the Prophet.
So, when you